there's a huge opportunity in the tier 2, tier 3 for women entrepreneurs.
The women entrepreneurs need to prove it much more than a male counterpart.
Females are on executive post in India, just imagine. Lesser than 5% people are CEOs or CXOs.
Male-led VC funds are taking risks on women, at least in India, slightly higher than the global averages.
Thank you so much, and I just want to do a time check. We are starting in 5 minutes to 11, so we're going to give ourselves 60 minutes, and I'm so happy to see all of you on stage. Just to set a quick context, so women today are really, not only leading but transforming the innovation ecosystem. And today we are going to discuss how, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what are the roadblocks. And I have you already heard about the esteemed panel that we have here. What I want to start with all of you here, and I want to give you each just a line to talk about. Briefly share a little bit about your journey. I know, Sarika, you're not an entrepreneur, but you deal with so many entrepreneurs. Priya, you have been on the entrepreneurship journey for really 2 decades now. So is Rimjim and Payal. Olga, yourself as well, we were talking just now. Tell us a little bit of what inspired you to enter the startup ecosystem. And Sarika, for you specifically, what inspired you to go the route of angel investments?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much for your question. Let me please briefly describe my journey. I have started my career 25 years ago, and I was working at the commercial banking sector. Then I joined Central Bank of Russia Federation. I was top manager at the Central Bank of Russia. Then I joined the biggest crypto exchange company, Binance, and I was working for there. And 3 years ago, I have decided to start my own business. It was quite challenging, but because I have this quite unique experience in the intersection of traditional finance, government relations, and crypto, for me it was not so difficult because I have a lot of clients currently, because it's like a different worlds, traditional finance and crypto, and they are trying. A lot of businesses trying to bridge this experience. So I'm also wrote a book dedicated to searching for regulatory clarity in crypto, and I am currently in Moscow. I am lecturing at different universities, and for me it was always challenging because I'm a woman and I'm blonde, and I had a lot of questions from the male, but I think. I achieved something, but I remember once I was told that finance area is not for women, and I will never jump above the regular accountant, but I'm always trying to prove contrary. So it's briefly my journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Sarika, can we hear about your journey?
Thank you, Vitika. Thank you for having us here. It's, when I was growing up in Delhi, and my favorite subject was mathematics, and that was something that was completely unheard of, that a woman, she would probably not understand most of it. So biases have been built into our society from the very beginning. I went on to do 2 MBAs, both in finance, and of course working in this space now. And the reason why I chose this, I think it's more the industry chose me, because I felt that this is a space where I could add value. Having worked with the likes of the best of the companies across the world, raising money for them, leading their fundraising, or startups. I have done some sort of a corporate entrepreneurship also earlier in my life. I felt this is the space which needed more support, and where I could add my experience, and now with being a part of the fund, also capital, where it is rightly needed.
Thank you, Sarika. Can we, Priya, tell us a little bit? You run a very innovative startup, right? I don't want to call it a startup anymore, but tell us a little bit about it and how you chose to be where you are.
Okay, Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Vitika. My name is Priya. We built a company called carwale.com. While building Carwale, we realized that cars are not answer for the country like India, and we thought about it in 2013-14 that what is next. And when the team loves wheels, we thought that we will build something which is for masses, and that's when the Chalo mobility came. Chalo is a simply now we are MSME, no more startup as Vitika said. Chalo works with public buses like you see DTC buses. How many people have taken the bus today? You have taken the bus. Can you live track your bus exactly where your bus is? No, that's exactly what we do. We give you the accurate live tracking where exactly your bus is, and when you get inside the bus, we provide entire ticketing as digital ticketing, right from National Common Mobility Card to ONDC to WhatsApp ticketing to closed loop cards. So the entire ticketing solution we are providing. We run around 30,000 buses on Chalo platform, measuring around 4 billion rides in a year, becoming India's largest transport tech mobility company. We can, as I was talking to Rimjim, we can also tell you how crowded your bus is. I did my master's in social work around 25 years ago with medical and psychiatric social work with the ambition of doing something which is going to help India becoming better, and doing that every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priya. Rimjim, I very interested to understand, you run a organization called BrainSight AI, right? And that itself has something about the company, but tell us a little bit more. And more importantly, how did you get there? What inspired you to do what you're doing now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. So what we do is brain mapping. What you must have already used Google Maps. So what we are doing is building a Google map for the brain, which tells you the functions of where the language region of the brain is, where the visual region is, what is the cognitive network in the brain, and why it is required, because that gives more information to doctors to perform surgeries. So right now in India, 52 plus hospitals are using our technology commercially, and 100 plus hospitals are doing pilots and others with us. So that's the major technology that we work with. Brain mapping is not easy. It's a very difficult technology. It's a deep tech in neurotech, and data is also a difficult data set. However, we are a category creator in this space, but nonetheless, we get really good traction because it is required in medical systems right now. How I started, I have done my PhD in machine learning in neurosciences from Bangalore NIMHANS. If you are aware of National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, that is one of the most prestigious institute in India, gets a lot of footfall of patients in clinical space. So I had access in my PhD to a lot of medical data set that could be utilized for understanding difficult disorders. I have worked in schizophrenia and OCDs, which is a very difficult set of disorder in psychiatry. That was to understand how we can utilize various modalities of brain data to understand more about how the brain functions, which can be utilized as indicator for various disorders. However, when we started this company, we started with psychiatry, but we got a really good traction in neurosurgery. They require it for performing surgeries. That is where we started into neurosurgery space. How I got interested in startup is because I was probably not fitting anywhere else because healthcare is, number one, healthcare requires a lot of new tech, and that is one space where we have not seen a revolution like we have seen in finances and others. I think this decade is going to be about healthcare and neurotech. That's where a lot of traction we are getting now. Second, even though I didn't want to prove myself, because I always thought, why do girls need to prove themselves? There is no other way. I definitely had to prove myself, and finally this was one of the pathway where I could do that very well. And healthcare has been always motivating to me to make an impact. Me and my co-founder is also a women co-founder. She has MBA in healthcare itself. So we both wanted to team up to something which is more impact driven, and that's where we founded this company.
So we have an accidental entrepreneur. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Payal. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Thank you, Vitika. Good morning, everyone. So I have about 3 decades of experience, mostly in the corporate, in the tech industry. So I did my engineering. So of course I had these questions of why do girls do engineering? Followed by working for tech companies like in telecom. So I worked for Alcatel, GE, Wipro, Aricent. My last role in corporate was IBM. For me, the thing that brought about the change was coaching. So as part of my corporate journey, I also went through executive coaching. And at that time, I used to think I know it all. I've done it all. But I realized that there's a lot more to learn in life. And during COVID, I decided to consult and coach. I became a coach. I started consulting and coaching a lot of youngsters, mid-management, and I realized that I found that much more impactful, much more fulfilling than just adding to the P&Ls of the organizations that I have worked in. And I decided to build a B2B SaaS company. So it marries what I've done all my life with what I'm passionate about now, which is people and helping everyone reach their infinite potential. And because I think I really am at a stage in life where I don't have to prove anything anymore. So I decided to do something of my own and give back to all the youngsters and mid-management to go to the next level. So that's what we have. It's executive coaching, a leadership development, a leadership acceleration platform, which we sell through corporates and a lot of big four, etc.
Thank you, Payal. Thank you. Let's quickly dive into a few themes that are set for us today. Firstly, let's talk about overcoming the challenges and the biases that women entrepreneurs face in the startup ecosystem. Starting with you, Sarika, if I were to ask you, what do you think are the biggest structural barriers that women entrepreneurs face in India?
The biases creep in from the very beginning. But this day and age, I think a lot more exposure has happened and people are aware of the channels where they can actually get support in terms of either be it capital or mentorship. But in tier 2, tier 3 cities where even if mentorship is available, the capital access is a problem.
So capital, you will say, is one big structural barrier?
The right kind of capital. So there is the grant capital as well, where a lot of states, small universities are doing that. But once that happens, to prove yourself, you have to go to the next level. So the other thing is more access to the wider network or to people who can validate your product, your service. And so that the entrepreneur can benchmark themselves against what is the best. It is very easy to feel that you're building something great when you're in a small area. But to compete with the best, you need that access. So I think that would be the second thing. And third, while I mentioned mentorship is available, but there have to be champions who actually can put you forward. Mentorship is cheap. It doesn't get you money. But this is something that will push you forward and put you in front of the right kind of people. I think those are the things that are important.
While coming to you, this particular issue of structural barriers, and when she talks of mentorship, and you are right in the thick of things, do you think that is unique to women entrepreneurs? This whole access to the right mentorship at the right time?
To some extent, I would say yes, Vitika. And the reason is if you look at the networks, all the VC funds, PEs, accelerators, a lot of them, most of them are run by men. Yeah. So there's very, and there are a lot of networks, by the way. If you see a lot of tech companies, Google, Amazon, even a lot of VCs and Ps, they provide the entire mentorship acceleration platform. But how many women have access to it? You know, some of the best accelerators are, or mentorship programs are by IITs. IIMA has a great program. How many women are there? How many women are from IIMs and IITs, right? So in general, the access that women have is less. So we need some more networks, mentorship platform, which focus on women.
Olga, I want to come to you. Do you think it is the same in a country like yours?
Actually, what I see is that Russia and India currently we are at remarkably similar points of development in female leadership. So yes, you're absolutely right that we do not have so much access to some difficult stuff like IT, technology, neuroscience, but the situation is changing permanently. For example, a few decades ago, it was very difficult for women even to choose the profession, let alone to be entrepreneurs. But currently, we see a lot of female leaders in very difficult areas, such like neuroscience and engineering. It's even more difficult for me than finance. Yes, I have my consulting business in finance area, which is also not like a traditional routine stuff for females. So I find that India and Russia are currently at a similar stage. And I remember one story. Several months ago, I was also in India. I also visited some professional finance summit, and I had a breakfast in a cafe near the hotel, and it was a young woman in a sari holding her child at her shoulders and having business negotiation in English, of course, otherwise I wouldn't understand what she's talking about. It was really nice for me. So it was the first time in India. It was quite inspiring. So I see really a lot of similarities, and I think that we need to have a discussion like that to share our experience, especially India for Russia is one of our key trading partner. So, and I'm very happy that we have such a discussion now.
Thank you. Priya, coming to you. What in your view do you consider fair opportunity? What would you consider calling fair opportunity, especially for women entrepreneurs in the startup ecosystem?
I was reading a data that women, when they go out and pitch something, they are being asked on basis of nitty-gritty of the business, and men are being asked for the growth of the business. So when women are there sitting on the table, you will assume that they are risk averse and they won't be able to take up any difficult challenge, and they will not be able to achieve and beat the dash dead out of somebody and have a winning attitude in comparison of men, because men are being given a safe assumption that they are going to win if they are capable. Women have to prove it. And all of us in the society where we have grown up, I grew up in a very small town called Vidisha in Madhya Pradesh, and thankfully my parents were very forward looking, both of them from education background and PhDs and professors, and my sister is also professor doctorate. So it was a very different atmosphere because my mother didn't have brother and my sister and I didn't have brother. So entire family was like female, very strong female driven family, where I was not taught or made to feel that you can't do anything just because you are a woman, because from 7th or 8th standard I started getting cylinder in the house. There was no house help in those days, and then you have to go to Chakki to do atta and everything. And my cousin used to do atta for rotis. So my father made it very, very, gender neutral in the house. As a person, I never felt that I cannot do anything, and it came from the family first. Then you get married to someone who doesn't make you feel that, and even if they make you feel, you should do certain things in your life where you have to stand up for yourself. For example, in Carvale, I was taking care of humanities and culture and HR for 10 years, and then when Chalo started, for first 3 years I got bored, and I went to my co-founders, they are males, and I told them I have outgrown of this role and I don't belong in HR anymore. No offense to HR people, but I told them that I want to do something else, and I demanded for like 8-9 months, and then I was given a sales role, and today 90% sales come from my department in Chalo, and then I take care of the entire public market business and government affairs and brand and advocacy and entire field operation, which is very, very unusual to women. So my message to women are that there will be biases, there will not be equal opportunities, there will not be given anything fairly to you. Not anything against men, but that's how the society works, and we should make peace with it, and we should try little harder rather than getting bitter कि हमें क्यों नहीं मिल रहा, थोड़ा सा धीरे मिलेगा, but I think we will get there. It's very alarming data when you say that 90% founders are male and 3% founders are female, right? Lesser than 5% females are on executive post in India, just imagine. Lesser than 5% people are CEOs or CXOs, which is a very, very alarming data. But don't get there. We can start from today, and there are in disparities which we cannot kill, but we can get over it. And I think males are also very welcoming these days.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. Sarika, coming to you, as a person sitting on the other side of the table who is actually deciding the destiny of entrepreneurs, in your experience, do investors ask different questions to women entrepreneurs?
I think the questions are not very different, but as was said earlier, the women entrepreneurs need to prove it much more than a male counterpart. So a male counterpart's vision would be enough, given their background, given what they've done in the past. But for a similarly educated, similar experienced woman, it would probably be checking first whether your product or your service works before we decide to fund it. That said, the technical questions, all the hygiene questions remain the same, but there is always this little bit that one needs to prove as to, will you be committed to to your business in the long term? Will there be other challenges that you'll be facing?
How will you manage home and business?
Exactly.
That's a typical question.
Typical question, but nobody dares
And not
ask
just
it
business.
right now.
I think even when you're in a career, the first
Yeah, the
thing
first
is
thing
how
is-
will you manage home and business? No
Yeah.
man, I think, is asked that.
No
right?
man is asked that. And
Yeah.
if you get married, will you quit? Or if you're deciding to get married, is it close by to the office? Or will you stop coming to office? Those are little things which were asked many, many years ago. People don't ask it outrightly now, but these questions exist in everybody's mind. I mean, I would say it's not gone away.
So I think fair opportunity would mean when we are stopped asking these questions.
Stop
right?
thinking about the questions.
Yeah,
I mean,
stop
asking
thinking.
people have stopped
Yeah.
because of all the
Okay,
things that
right.
need to do.
So, this is something that we've been talking of, and you've been talking of, this whole thing of bias against women entrepreneurs versus the male entrepreneurs. You spoke of the bias. Have you actually experienced it explicitly anytime, and how have you navigated through that?
From time to time, yes, but I'm also at the age when I stop I'm eligible for certain work and a certain position. So I would like to tell about one strong side in female attitude to business. For me, it's first of all awareness. Women always take risk more cautiously. We are much more risk adverse as compared to male, from my point of view. And yesterday we had a discussion here. We have the discussion dedicated to why startups fail. And one of the reasons that actually a lot of business start to scalability without proper market fit, without proper demand, proper product. A lot of startups start to invest a lot of money without even having clear business plan. And this is totally opposite if we are talking from my point of view, if we are talking about female attitude, because we are cautious, we think much more before we jump into the water. And I think this is one of the strongest side of female attitude to business.
Thank you, Olga. That's a very, very valid point. Rimjim, coming back to you, I want to understand in your journey, have any male allies played a part, and how do you think male allies can play a part in leveling the playing field?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a few examples of in 2021, the average VC funding to a women-led team was 0.3. That means 99.7% funding was given to male startups, which improved in 23-24, which was 2% globally, and in 26 it is back to 0.9%. But in India, the percentages are 4%, which is really good, which means that even male-led VC funds are taking risks on women, at least in India, slightly higher than the global averages. So that's absolutely true. The first set of VC fundings that we received were from the men-led VC funds. It was also Angel Network, Stanford Angels, and one of them are still on the board, and they are really supportive people. Sandeep Singhal and Akshat, who work with us very closely. These are very supportive male counterparts which guided us, helped us, believed in us. We took so much of risk. We started in 2019, and in 2020 COVID happened in a medical technology space, which is elective medical technology. It is difficult space, and they still took a bet on us. So definitely they supported us.
Great, thank you. I want to come to the next part of our discussion, where I want to discuss about how women approach innovation, women entrepreneurs, women business owners. Payal, can you tell us a little bit about what you think? Do women have a different leadership style? Do they have a different innovation management style versus the men? Is there something that you have seen in your journey as a coach and a mentor?
So at the cost of sounding biased, I would say that based on my experience of having worked in largely male-dominated businesses with very few women, and followed by my coaching and mentoring experiences, and I have also coached quite a few startups. I've also worked for Invest India, Startup India for quite some time, seen a lot of women and men innovators. And largely speaking, I think women, the leadership style is much more collaborative and inclusive. Again, this is a very general statement, doesn't mean all women leaders are like that, but largely they are more collaborative, they'll be more inclusive, they are able to, or they like building very diverse teams. So when the team is diverse, it just brings a lot more ideas on the table which are diverse and looking at all aspects. So they are able to build, innovation which is based on let's say ideas coming from various sides, different perspectives, and also more sustainable, more purpose driven, largely speaking.
Thank you. Priya, what do you think? Is there, do women entrepreneurs approach innovation differently?
I have 3 alpha males co-founders, and sometimes I think they don't understand what I'm saying, and most of the time they think I don't understand what they are saying, and there's a constant banter कि तुम्हें वो एक गालिब का शेर है ना कि वो भी ना समझे बात हमारी, हम भी ना समझे उनकी बात, या तो हम ही दीवाने हैं गालिब या दुनिया दीवानी है. So this is very evident in my experience, because women come, and I have been speaking to our leadership coach. We have a leadership coach, 2 leadership coaches in fact, and I was telling them that sometimes it becomes a very difficult situation, that I'm seeing some problem in a very different angle and they will say something else, and they 3 of them will think exactly in the same manner. And she,
Cookie cutter approach.
I don't, they can't get away with me. That's a different case, because then I'll say, okay, let's discuss this. And there is no kind my way, highway, and you agree with me, I agree with you. It doesn't happen. But yeah, so I realized that there is something called lateral thinking, which is very high in women, which is what my observation is, because 50-50 is our gender ratio in management team. All 3 females are very strong females. My legal head is female. My finance head is female. Just imagine, legal, finance and sales head is all of them are females, and then the problem solving is very different approach for us. And when you have equal participation, it becomes easier. But this is very evident, that if you are sitting on a table, people will very subtle way mein, they will make you feel that you don't understand business. And this is very common in women's world, that she would have faced, and thank God Rimjim has a female co-founder. But my board has sometimes asked me, how many hours you sleep if you are working like this? And these are the questions when they come. So our brain works very, very differently. And what you said that about diversity, that when you accept that some other gender is bringing a way you haven't never thought about, makes whole lot of difference in both parties' life.
So you're saying that women are more accepting of diverse opinions, they are more accepting of different perspectives, because they have learned to take that in their stride. And
Yeah,
that is,
because of maybe societal conditional, that we are more open, more accepting, more flexible. I am not saying men are not, but everyone know the truth, especially countries like India, that we are more open, flexible, and more forward-looking in terms of receiving someone else's ideas and thinking about it, getting underconfident that whether we are thinking right or not thinking right. This I think it happens sometimes with all of us, that, oh, am I not able to see the problem? Then you realize, no, it's not that. They are also not able to see that what can it get to.
sure. Thank you. I want to talk about how things are changing in the funding investment space. More and more women are now entering angel networks, they're entering private equity investment funds. Sarika, this is for you. How do you think that is changing the funding dynamics?
It does. So we are a women-led fund, and how we look at the problem, we also have male counterparts in managing the fund, but how we look at the problem is also different. You know, what we have seen that while women are becoming entrepreneurs, they are solving problems which are much closer to them, which are something that a lot more other people would be facing but not do anything about it. So it's very real, it's solving a real problem, and those are the things we are seeing. In terms of the funding, yes, now women are at that age and stage where they can actually contribute back. So a lot of people are joining the angel networks, and the reason for that is, of course, they are wanting to give back, but also give their skills also to the companies that are needing that. And being a part of the venture capital fund, we are also, I mean, it's an equal opportunity where we are seeing enough and more women coming up. In fact, in DPIIT startup, at least 45 to 50% of them either are women-led or have a co-founder which is woman. So that is a big thing that is happening now in India. And in tier 2, tier 3 cities wherein entrepreneurship is maybe the only way to become financially independent, where the avenues are not that much. So women are stepping up, they have opportunities to see what is happening across the world. So digitization has actually, I think, changed the game quite a bit.
Olga, to you. Do you think there are certain sectors or industries or segments of entrepreneurship that women are uniquely positioned to disrupt?
Actually, I'm thinking about statistical data. I remember the last research of our Ministry of Economic Development that at the beginning of 2026 it was 50% of women in small and medium enterprise business. And actually, we have already discussed the alarming statistics that at the big corporation, top management is almost male. But we see, according to statistic of our Ministry of Economy, small and medium exercise, 50% already women. I simply think that soon we may no longer need the statistic, I mean, female entrepreneurship statistical, because it will be normal. It will be no exception, because today we are talking about like exceptional cases, yes, something unusual. I really believe that it will become more and more normal, like a normal life. From answering your question, what type of business could be disruptive, I really do not see so much difference. Yes, we are much more flexible, we are much more collaborative, much more friendly sometimes, but it really depends. We see more and more women entering male niches currently, and I really don't want to segregate like it's for male and this is for female. I really do believe that sooner we will stop such a discussion and more female will enter in, women will enter into traditional male niches.
Thank you. Rimjim, do you think there is a women advantage in entrepreneurship? Since you both are, you're a women-led venture, you think being a woman gives you like a advantage over the other gender in any way?
Yes and no. I would go with no first, because like I mentioned, the ratios are really skewed. So overall, the successful number of startups coming out is more men-led, and therefore it is believed that men are making more successful companies as compared to women, and therefore the risk-taking on the male counterpart is more as compared to women, which means that we are maybe talking to some 10 times more number of investors to get the same amount or even lesser amount of funding from the ecosystem, right? So that is very difficult. Definitely we need to reach out to more and more investors as compared to the male. And one example is, we went to a particular investment VC fund. We had a lot of discussion. We had 4 to 5 meetings, and later we got to know from them that in one discussion they have given the funding to somebody else who they just felt that, okay, this person was a good learner, risk taker, and then they just gave it to them, which was very disheartening to us because we proved a lot to those set of investors. So I would rather say it is really difficult to raise money, and also in general. So I walk into the room as women in technology, the representation is very low. Very few women in technology still in India, right? Then I walk into the room because we work in neurosurgery. If there will be 100 men neurosurgeons, only 1 or 2 women who are neurosurgeons. So every room I walk into, most of the time, women representation is very low. It is the same in civil engineering, it is the same in hardware, it is the same in finance. So I'm talking about major domains here, and all these places have really small representation of women. which is coming out from the very basic. If you see colleges, I went to BHU very recently, and even the colleges like that, which is prestigious colleges, the women representation is very low, and so that means even after 10 and 15 years from now, we are not going to see the huge shift that we want to see, that women are present everywhere. That is not going to happen even in 5 years to 10 years course. So which means that we are still going to be lacking the opportunity and taking risk on women even after that. That's my whole
So
take
you
on
don't
this.
see any advantages as an entrepreneur that a women can bring to the table?
Women can bring a lot, because like all of them are talking about empathy is thing which women drives the companies with empathy and collaboration. That is proven. There is data, there is statistics backing those up. Definitely that's the case. However, the representation, the numbers, how much we want women to come in the industry is really skewed.
Thank you. Let's come to talk about something a little, different. Now, I think the next wave of entrepreneurship or new ventures is going beyond the metros. It's coming from tier 2, tier 3 towns. I think all of you will agree with me. Payal, tell us, what do you think are the challenges this tier 2, tier 3 women are likely to face, to run successful ventures?
I think firstly, what we've seen, and maybe Sarika can add here, but I remember, which was a couple of years back, but as part of Startup India, whenever we used to go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, and Startup runs a lot of capability building programs, and so do a lot of state government. So you walk into that room and you would see a equal representation. I don't remember any room where women would be less than at least 45% of the total room. So actually, the fact that digital literacy has gone to tier 2 and tier 3, a lot of large tech companies are also operating out of tier 2, tier 3. So suddenly the digital literacy is so high, the opportunities are higher in tier 2, tier 3. You'll see a lot of women coming up and being interested in entrepreneurship. See, entrepreneurship is taxing, but somewhere it also gives flexibility to handle whatever other responsibilities women are handling. And we have to accept that finally home and caring for kids and elders somehow largely falls on the shoulders of women. So I think there's a huge opportunity in the tier 2, tier 3 for women entrepreneurs. However, the challenges that they will face, Vitika, is pretty similar to what we were discussing, right? So the networks and the mentorship platforms are somewhere even less. So what happens is, if you are in tier 1, somewhere you'll get to know people, you'll get warm introductions to the VCs, to the PEs, right? So in tier 2, tier 3, you lack those warm introductions, which is extremely important. So the network, the opportunity to, get mentorship, and generally, the perception that, oh, will she be able to do it? That is something that will bog the women down.
Priya, you have any ideas on how we can enable that? Any ideas on how that can be enabled, those constraints, so that, there is, of course, there are constraints of, formal workforce joining from tier 2, tier 3 for cultural reasons, for, other physical constraints. But entrepreneurship, like you said, gives you that flexibility. But how do we make it more level for them?
Good part is that I am also from tier 2 city or tier 3 city, and we came here to Bombay and made Carwale successful. So my experience is very different. Second good part of the world is that world is so connected today. When we started 25 years ago, there was no kind of internet and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. Nobody was talking about it. There was no social network. Today there are a lot of platforms where you can engage with whoever you want to. I remember we writing to somebody in San Francisco in those days, and that guy responded on email. Today you can shoot those kind of 50 emails through LinkedIn and search, put a search, and you can get lot of investors, lot of board members. People are far more open today than they were 25 years ago. Government has done good job in startup missions and smart city missions and startup India events, because they have started startup India mission in like tier 2 cities, and there is a network of entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. I keep going to meet them. For example, MP generally Madhya Pradesh calls us back, all the entrepreneurs who have been successful, and I keep meeting them. They have opportunity to pitch, but when it comes to gender, what Payal said stays true, that when it comes to gender, I think there is still a glass ceiling which we all need to break, and women have to come up. And I little bit differ with her on the point that being an entrepreneur for 20 years, there's no flexibility. Like first time I have met my daughter's class teacher, and she said, your husband comes always, ma'am. I have never seen you like in this academic session. And I said, yeah, I'm so sorry, I do sales, so I keep traveling, and there are like 100+ cities, so I can't go. I am so sorry, but this year I will be more regular. So that's what. Something
Sure.
comes up with something
Sarika,
else.
you wanted to say something.
I wanted to add something, and this is something that when I was studying in the UK, young girls studying there, so we were invited by a group of top tier investment bankers, and there's a lady who said something, and it just stuck to me after 25 years. She said, the biggest support system or the biggest thing that can stop you from moving forward is your support system back home, is the man behind there who can make you go forward or he can stop you. So I would like to say that while all of us are here, it is only because of the support of what we're getting at home as well. And that we should not discount, because there are people pushing us forward. And this is the 50% of the population who's actually understanding what it takes to be where we are today.
That's really well said. I mean, one of the guys, he's sitting in the audience for me, my dad here. So I think a lot of us have, like you said, there is a support system that propels you, or there is a roadblock that keeps you back. Yeah. Olga, do you find this in your country as well? Do you think the smaller city entrepreneurs are now really coming forward? And do you think they're building different kinds of businesses than their metro counterparts?
Actually, we have quite similar discussion in Russia, because our country is very, very big as yours, and we have two largest cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg, and like all the rest, I would say like this. And actually, we had such situation in the past, but I think it was changed a lot. It changed a lot after COVID time, after 2022, when a lot of people started to have remote work and worked remotely, and currently online has diminished, has erased borders. We can see a lot of entrepreneurs from small regions, from small cities, because they simply having this financial literacy, digitalization, they are able to develop and provide their product globally in the world. And so, yes, we still have differences for sure. In big cities there's much more opportunities, but again, I see really a trend that a lot of entrepreneurs from small cities actually start to conquer the world. For example, we have one very famous brand in Russia, Natura Sibirica. It was created by a young woman who just simply was not able to find safe cosmetic for her child. It's from Siberian wild herbs, the same like Mama Earth in India, like a big ecosystem. Yes, and this is exactly developed from small region in the center of the, not from, but from small region. Yes.
So, what do you think, Primjit? are these entrepreneurs who are coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities or towns, are they building different kind of businesses from their metro counterparts?
Absolutely. I mean, they have different problems altogether that they see. I think the idea of any startups comes from the problems they are seeing in their own area, locality, and then expanding it to the other states and cities, because tier 2 cities are going to have similar kind of problems. And like, she belongs from Vidisha, I belong from Bhilai, Chhattisgarh, which is very small city and tier 3 city, I would say. And back then when I was doing my education, there were very limited options for even education. I have done my bachelor's from Pune, master's from Vellore, and then PhD from Bangalore. So I could never stay at my place because there were lesser opportunities. But now people are coming up with. Recently, I heard about one company, Peer 2, which is coming out from my city, and that person is building a kind of social network which is very similar to LinkedIn, but also to give more opportunities to tier 2, tier 3 people. So definitely the problems getting solved are coming from very different point of lacking of the opportunity, creating more opportunity, creating more products which are more suitable for them. Healthcare is also having great penetration now to these cities. We are working with a distributor system who are also neuro navigation system, and they are specifically working in the tier 2 cities. HRS is a neuro navigation system, and they specifically work in tier 2 cities. So definitely new use cases are opening up.
Thank you. Okay, coming to our last section of the discussion today, and this is about, you know, the whole policy framework, the government support and all of that. Sarika, do you think we have enough of, we have the right policy framework to promote women entrepreneurs in India?
I think we do. I think there are, at the ground level, there are enough and more opportunities for entrepreneurs in general. I mean, let alone women, but also all kinds of entrepreneurs have that opportunity and access to the first level of funding to at least prove the product. But like I had mentioned earlier, the support where we need is slightly above the government policy, slightly above where the actual make or break happens, which is pre-Series A or Series A kind of funding, where I think still a lot of work still needs to be done.
Quick one from you, Priya. Priya.
I think government is better than the venture-led funds. This is what I feel, because of the same reason that SHGs and small medium enterprises, what we need in India is that venture-led and startup India funds, or a lot of government-led small medium enterprise funds should be blending together, and then it should be created in a manner of what Sarika said, to A series or B series, because they are limited to the certain kind of money, and then going and taking a leap needs exposure and backing from someone. But government is better.
You're saying a little more synchronization.
Synchronization between big funds and the initial funds,
Government,
because then the
startup.
scale is a problem otherwise, if you don't have that kind of money.
Thank you, thank you. So before we end today, I have a rapid fire just to energize the panel and end on a high note. So I'm going to start with you, Sarika. One question, and I want one line answer, no more. Okay? So Sarika, one myth about women founders you want to break.
That they cannot scale.
Thank you. Priya, one piece of advice for aspiring women founders.
Don't think lesser than anybody else. It's just equal opportunity for you.
Thank you, thank you. Rimjim, yours. One bold prediction for future of women in India's startup ecosystem. One bold prediction, since you're in AI.
A lot of innovation will be led by women, and also in difficult technologies. I feel like healthcare and others are definitely going to be built by empathy, which women will bring.
Thank you, thank you. Payal, yours. One hack to accelerate scale up.
Accelerate yourself.
Wow,
one point at a time.
Wow, that's fantastic. Olga, for you, one common pitfall for early stage founders that they should be cautious of.
Always plan carefully what you are going to develop.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, panelists. It was lovely talking to you. I know that as we close this session, we know, all of us, after hearing you, that the next round of innovation and entrepreneurship is not just innovation, it's going to be inclusion, and we will have more and more women who will transform this ecosystem. Thank you so much.
I'll request the esteemed session chair to kindly do us the honors of presenting mementos to all of our esteemed speakers as a token of our thanks. We start by thanking Ms. Olga Gonchareva. We thank Ms. Sarika Saxena. Our thanks to Ms. Priya Singh. Our thanks to Ms. Rimjim Agarwal. We express our thanks to Ms. Payal Kaul Mirakhur. Thank you. And to present a memento to the esteemed moderator, may I invite on stage Ms. Shikha Jaiswal from Exhibitions India Group. Thank you for steering this discussion.